Okay, welcome to Tales by the Sea. Good to see you all again. And good to see, we have 3 tellers who are performing today who have not been at Tales by the Sea before. So I'm really glad to welcome them also. The theme is Detours. It's the last concert of 2021. And our first teller, you know, the theme is detours, and I know that we all know what a detour is, and we probably all had several in our lives. The first teller I'm going to introduce with a quote he chose.
Did you hear something? No, I could hear it early when I was on YouTube.
I'm going to introduce our first teller with a quote he chose from Satchel Paige. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? Stuart Jacobson tells the Vanity of Denial that he is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not.
Let's see. Is the earphone?
We're at one of my dream locations, a sidewalk cafe in France. Specifically, we're in the village of Vaison-la-Romaine, overlooking the town square, in one of several cafes, bars, and restaurants where people while away the afternoon on this beautiful late summer day. We're here because my wife and I are here with our grandson Lee, and we're here because of my son and his wife Zena. I've been invited to a destination wedding in the nearby town of Sorg. Now, we've been drafted to be, we've been enlisted, drafted to be babysitters for them as they go to the wedding and to accompany them on this trip. We're here with my grandson Lee, who is pushing 4 years old. He's got toilet training issues. We're also here with our 1-year-old grandson, Julian, who is not yet having toilet training issues. We are enjoying ourselves immensely on this trip so far, and we've just trekked through the ancient ruins of the town, and we're at the point where we want to restore ourselves and have a cup of coffee. Now, I take being a grandparent very seriously. It takes a lot of effort to tickle a 3-year-old and then buy him ice cream. But also I take seriously one of my endeavors of being a grandparent, namely is to provide a comfort zone for the grandchildren, to help them extend their innocence, to keep them young and naive and enjoying life, protect them from the negativity of the world, to try to keep them, protect them from the unfortunate goings on going on in the world right now. And again, this is something I take very, very seriously. Now, we have just spent most of the day going through these ruins, and now is the point my wife and I just want a restorative moment. We want a cup of coffee. And we pick a cafe that specializes in coffee and ice cream. Of course, it's too early to start imbibing stronger stuff. Now, Jesse and Zena, my daughter and my son and daughter-in-law, they want to walk their child Julian around in this carriage because they wanted to take an extended nap. So they leave Lee with us as they go on their walk. Now, as I said, Lee's got toilet training issues, and Jesse and Zena, before they leave us, they impose another bit of labor on us. Jesse speaks first. He says, "Dad, Mom, it is absolutely important, it is vital that when either one of you or both of you have to go to the bathroom, you must require Lee to go with you and insist that he use the toilet." And then Zena pipes in, adds in, says, "Stuart, Gretchen, it's impossible to overstate, to overemphasize the importance of what Jesse said to you. It is absolutely necessary for you to take Lee with you when you go to the toilet and to insist that he use it." So they leave, and Zena, my wife and I, we order our standard drinks. Gretchen has it. My wife has a cafe au lait. I get my typical espresso macchiato with an extra shot, and Lee orders his go-to chocolate ice cream. We truly are creatures of habit. And we are enjoying ourselves, watching the strollers, the dog walkers, the shoppers, the denizens of the other cafes as they, spend the afternoon smelling the roses. And our drinks arrive, Lee's ice creams arrive, and we're having a great time. And Lee is occupying himself with some small toys. Now, after about 15 minutes, my wife decides that she's got to go to the bathroom. So she gets up to go, and she says to Lee, "Come, I want you to join me and go to the bathroom with me." And he says, "No, I don't want to go. I don't have to go." She says, "You got to go." And she insists. He says, "No." And I see what's an impending standoff is going to happen. So I interrupt and I say, "You know what? Don't make him go to the bathroom. That's his parents' job. Let them be the bad guys." So she ponders this for a moment, nods in agreement, and walks off. As soon as she's out of earshot, Lee says to me, "Grandpa, is Grandma a bad guy?" And I think to myself, "My God, I wish I had an audience now. This is the perfect time to savor this loaded question, to enjoy this moment, to make a long face, just to think about this." But no, I have with me a 3-year-old plus with toilet training issues and an age-appropriate attention, short attention span. So I try to take as long as I can. I say, "Is Grandma a bad guy?" And I move my wrist back and forth, and I say, "Well, not really, no." But before I can finish, he points to a man in another cafe and says, "Is he a bad guy?" At this point, I'm offended by his lack of manners. But I find by pointing at a bad guy at a guy in another cafe, and I'm also truly appalled by his judgmental question. And so I say to him, "No, of course not. He's not a bad guy." He points before I can finish, he points to somebody else. "Is he a bad guy?" I say, "No." Then he points to another woman. He says, "Is she a bad guy?" I say, "No, absolutely not." And at this point, 4 realizations smash into me at once. One is that all my efforts to shield him, protect him from what is going on in the world, something that I called compassionate postponement, all my efforts at compassionate postponement have just gone out the window, okay? Number 2, I realized that I shouldn't be so horrified because nobody in this town cares about us. We're a bunch of tourists who will never be seen anywhere near this again. Number 3, I realized that, again, all my efforts have gone out the window. The compassionate postponement's gone, and that in my haste to communicate with my wife, adult to adult, in an efficient manner in front of an impressionable child, I mistakenly opened the door to profiling. And the 4th is I realized that I just did a terrible thing. And I made an awful detour on my grandparenting journey. So I'm just thinking about this when Lee starts, interrogating me about all these people in the town square. And I realized that it's just pure vanity of me to think that I could protect him or keep him from, what is truly a judgmental world. So he starts going again, "Is he a bad guy? Is she a bad guy?" So I start saying to him, no, yes, maybe, perhaps, yes, yes, yes. And he's excited. He is thrilled at this near affirmation that there are bad guys around us. So, he's having a great time. And I'm realizing that, all my efforts are, gone, and I have to work on this better for his brother, though he will probably get to his brother before me. So now, you know, he's at least having a great time because about 40 or 50 people in the square. He's going this one, that one, this one, that one, good, bad. I'm saying yes, yes, no, 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 you know, just going on and on. And finally, my wife comes back from the bathroom and Lee is excited and animated and turns to her, Grandma, there's a bad guy over there. She gives me a quizzical look, you know? And so at this point, and I say to her, you know what? I'll explain it to you later. So at this point, I realized that, you know, he's going to be a judgmental person, you know, and it was pure vanity of me to think that I could keep him from it. And it took a kid with toilet training issues, somebody who literally did not have a shit together, to, you know, let me know about how vain I was, my vanity of denial, so to speak. Now at least a little bit older now, he's able to use a computer, and he's infatuated with bad guys, you know, and whenever he gets a chance, he's especially infatuated with Chucky and his cohort. And whenever he gets a chance, he downloads a picture of Chucky and he says to me, Grandma, there's a bad guy. Grandpa, there's a bad guy. And he knows how to profile. And it's my fault. But I can tell you one thing. I believe that someday we're going to revisit this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Wouldn't I like to be here when you revisit that issue, Stuart?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll invite you. How's that?
We'll see if I'm good enough to be there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I'm going to introduce the next teller with her quote from Charles Bukowski. The shortest distance between 2 points is often unbearable. Vicki Juditz tells her story. The title is Kier.
I'm playing the piano. Someone to watch over me. It's my kids' piano. They go by they, them. And they have moved back to Los Angeles. And someday when they have their own place, no housemates, they'll come for the piano. But for now, it's mine. I'm playing this piano during the pandemic after a hiatus of over 50 years. I had some lessons as a kid. I could barely play. I'm teaching myself simple versions of old standards. My phone rings. I see by caller ID, it's my late husband's sister, my sister-in-law. She never calls, only texts. I pick up, I say, hello? Is everything okay? My dad had a heart attack. He's in the hospital where he could get the virus. I've got a through flight booked tomorrow morning, Cleveland to Fort Lauderdale, even though the virus, but I don't have a choice. Of course. I'm so sorry. Let me know how he is doing. In the 30-some years I've known my father-in-law, I can't really say I've had a conversation with him beyond a few words. He's one of the last of the Borscht Belt comics, and he was still performing up until a couple years ago, even after surviving lung cancer. But now at 84, he can't remember his act. He used to perform at Kutcher's in the Catskills, Harrah's in Atlantic City, cruise ships, nightclubs, Broadway. He never found anything I said interesting. My kid texts me from their place across town where they're teaching vocals and keys online, and they say, Mom, I got the writer's assistant job. I start tomorrow. It's a good day. I text back, wonderful, but I think, oh, this is so unfair. My kid's grandfather having a heart attack on my kid's good day? Because my kid hasn't had any good days lately. They were working for a scary, abusive boss at this production company. They finally quit, and they were so hoping for this new gig working for an old friend of my husband's who's got a new TV show, something about these guys who get out of prison and plan excellent heists with their mothers. I play someone to watch over me over and over till I get it down. I go out to the kitchen and make some coffee, and I see that my cat, Laura, who just turned 18, who's been my significant other for many years, hasn't touched her breakfast, her favorite, Fancy Feast grilled beef. I dump it out. I put turkey and gravy in her bowl. When my kid is through teaching, I call them up, I congratulate them about the job, and then I tell them about their grandfather. I speak quickly, I'm upbeat. My kid says, "Mom, you are so harsh. How are you not upset?" I say, "Well, I'm trying to stay calm, be positive. If my kid's grandfather dies and my kid and I brave the virus, fly east to the funeral, go to that cemetery outside New York City where the grandfather will be buried, my kid will see their father's grave for the first time. I had her father sent there to be with family. My cat eats nothing all day. She has fought kidney disease for a couple years, but she'd been holding her own. She stands in her little bed in the laundry room staring into space. So I Google appetite stimulants for cats. And at 10 p.m., I go to the grocery store and I get tuna fish and I bring it home and I give it to Laura. She eats a little. When I go to bed, she hops up on my pillow, curls herself in a tight ball, her eyes wide open. And I say to her, "Hang on. You and I are old ones together." In the morning, my sister-in-law texts me and she says, "I'm in Florida. The docs are saying my dad needs massive surgery, but I talked to his old cardiologist in New York City where they used to live and he disagrees. I wish I could get my dad to Cleveland." She means to the renowned Cleveland Clinic where her husband is an anesthesiologist. She goes on, "I don't know what to do." I know better than to offer advice. She doesn't want my opinion. She just wants to be heard. And I say, "Well, you will listen to the doctor you trust the most." My cat eats nothing again, but begs to go outside. She desperately laps water from the swimming pool. My kid texts me from their first day on the job as a writer's assistant. They say everybody is sitting outside in the backyard at the boss's house, everyone wearing masks. And they say that 4 of the writers were friends of their dads. The boss has up a whiteboard. He's writing down ideas. The writers are calling out jokes. "I love this," my kid texts. "Wonderful," I text back. "Hey, listen, not sure what's going on with your grandfather, and Laura the cat is not doing well." And my kid texts, "Mom, exclamation point, do not assume, exclamation point." I get my cat in her carrier, and as soon as we're in the car, she howls. My cat always howls in the car. We get over to the vet, and I can't go in with her because of the virus. The tech comes and takes Laura away in her little carrier. She and I have been together since she was a kitten. I drive home. My sister-in-law texts me she is getting her dad medevac from the hospital in Florida all the way to the Cleveland Clinic. He will have the best doctor in the whole world who is very handsome. 6 hours after I drop my cat off at the vet, the doc calls to tell me, well, all the tests are good except for the kidneys. The numbers are bad. Nothing she can do. I pick Laura up and she is silent in the car. This has never happened. For her to be silent in the car, I will have to decide when to end her life. The reason that my kid has never been to their father's grave is because the night before we were to fly, my kid had a panic attack outside, and they threw themselves down on the sidewalk, flailing back and forth. And I was really afraid that my kid was going to run out into the street, into the traffic. Their father's suicide had been a shock. I dialed 911 and a fire truck came and paramedics. My sister-in-law texted me that she sat next to the medevac pilot on the flight. Her dad is now settled in a beautiful private room at the Cleveland Clinic, and that handsome doctor is on the way. That night I dream about a calendar that tells me to play a different song each day, one of those standards I am learning. But it says that for tomorrow, I am to improvise an original composition. In the morning, my cat is not there. Laura always comes in to wake me in the morning. She's in her bed. I lift her gently. I take her outside. We sit in the sun. Her eyes water. My sister-in-law texts me that the handsome doctor has said no surgery will be needed, only stents. Later, she texts me the procedure went perfectly. I have been to that cemetery where my husband's buried because I went to the unveiling. That's a Jewish ceremony that takes place about a year after the burial. That cemetery is like a golf course. It's green grass to the horizon. My sister-in-law planned that ceremony for a time when my kid had to be out of town in Chicago playing in a band. My kid texts me about their second day on the job as a writer's assistant. Oh, a little bit of a tough day today, Mom. Too much old white dude humor. I sit down at the piano and I choose the easiest key, the key of C, no sharps, no flats. I hear a cheerful melody in my mind and I manage to play it. A cheerful melody that quickly turns dark. Next day, my sister-in-law texts me a picture of her dad sitting up in his hospital bed wearing a yellow hospital gown and matching yellow socks. He's reading the New York Post. You know, my kid could have gone to their father's grave at any time over the past 4 years when they were at NYU. That cemetery is a 40-minute drive from the city. But my kid said to me, Mom, Dad's not there. It's just bones in a box. My cat refuses to get out of bed, whimpers when I try to move her. My kid and their partner come over and we sit outside in the backyard wearing masks. My kid has baked a cake and brought some slices for me, a cake made of pistachios and gluten-free flour and eggs and yogurt and pomegranates. I have some later, it's delicious. That night I wake up many times and I go to be with Laura at her bedside. In the morning I call the vet. The appointment will be at 3. I can go in with her despite the virus, and the vet will send me Laura's ashes in a tiny wooden box. My sister-in-law texts my kid and me a photo of her dad at her house eating a bagel with her and her husband and her 3 adult kids who have all driven in from all over. Everyone is together, smiling, no one wearing masks. And my kid, who has also gotten this photo, texts me, Mom, this makes me nervous. Everyone together after traveling, no masks. And I say, well, I think, honey, that they feel that family being together is worth all risks. My kid comes over. And for the first time during the pandemic, I invite them into the house. We wear our masks and we go to be with Laura. We stroke her behind the ears, under the chin. We take turns putting our heads on her belly so we can listen to her faint purr. My kid leaves. I won't get another cat. It might outlive me. I sit down at the piano and I play my original melody, cheerful to sad, to cheerful to sad, to cheerful. I put Laura in her carrier and she opens her mouth and howls.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you for that mesmerizing journey. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks.
Our next teller, I'm going to introduce with a quote he chose from Howard Thurman. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Welcome Juan Martinez Vera. He tells, let the wind carry you.
I grew up in a small Mexican town of about 700 people. My father was a migrant worker who only came home once a year, usually during Christmas. And, you know, I was from a very humble family, but my dad always brought a gift. And even if Santa wasn't bringing them, he for sure brought a gift every Christmas. One year, he brought me the best gift I could have asked him. He gave me a VHS camera. He told me, Juan, I want you to record family events or anything that's worthy so that I could come back and watch it when I wasn't here. And so as a 6-year-old, I started doing what most kids do, play. So I started making movies with my toys in that camera. And I wasn't sure why, but I started to play that I was a filmmaker, that I was a film director. So my mom would see me with the camera on the ground and she would just look the other way like, okay, he's gonna break that any second. But I didn't break it. And I kept making movies with my toys and later with my own family members. Um, you know, that experience cemented in me a dream to make films. And very early on, I just set my mind very clear. I wanted to make movies. That was my life goal, my life dream. Fast forward, I'm 11 years old, and I moved to the US with my father. I become a workaholic kid, always doing everything possible to get straight A's in school. I imagined myself being a pilot, flying my destiny. I knew what I wanted to go. There were no detours back then. I knew exactly what I wanted, so I was gonna go for it. And working hard wasn't an issue for me. I could stay long hours to achieve what I wanted. Fast forward a couple years, and now I'm in film school as one of the youngest students making short films. And I was very ambitious back then. However, after graduation, reality came crashing down on me. There were no studios asking me to direct their movie. There were no offers of any kind. So I had to make a decision. And I told myself, well, I will try to get an assistant job in Hollywood somehow. And soon that wasn't an option either. There were way too many applicants for the positions, and that was just not going to happen. So I did what most college students do, send their resumes to hundreds of companies to see if one of them would land. Luckily for me, one company believed in me and hired me. And even though this job wasn't in Hollywood, I was still interviewing celebrities every week. So I was in a good spot. Above all, this job gave me comfort. I was working in an office in a penthouse. I had the freedom to write on my spare time. So I was very happy and comfortable. One day, one of my former classmates tells me, Juan, what's good about working if it's not in what you love? And that really caught my attention. I had forgotten about my dream of making movies. I was just living a very comfortable life and not really doing what I wanted. And this same classmate invited me to make a movie in his home country, the Dominican Republic. He told me if I agreed to work with them, we would move to his home country and start a production company from scratch. And he already had the money to do it. So we would just both work our asses off to make it happen, to make a movie. I was so excited when he said that, finally my dream was here. I was gonna make a movie. However, when he mentioned that I was gonna get paid less than half of what my job paid me, I started to doubt. I was living such a comfortable life in LA. I kept telling myself, maybe I could just keep writing and keep developing. Maybe I didn't have to leave my home to go to this foreign place. And adding to that doubt was my mother. She kept telling me, I don't want you to go to this foreign place. What if you get kidnapped and never return home? And I was like, geez, Mom, if you put it that way, I might as well stay in my apartment the whole time and not go out anywhere. But the fear was real. My father, back in the 50s, was kidnapped at gunpoint, and they had taken everything he owned. So at age 40, he decided to leave Mexico and move to the US because he was very traumatized by the experience. He couldn't go out on the streets by himself. So he decided to abandon everything he had to start from zero here in the US. So that motivation made me, think about it and say, well, if he could start from zero, I could start from zero. So I decided to take the opportunity and leave everything I had in Los Angeles. So the day I left to the Caribbean, it was 4 a.m. I remember the trip was 12 hours long. When we arrived, a familiar sighting occurred. People walking to you, offering you alcohol and partying, and don't get me wrong, the Dominicans are not this alcoholic nation, but they sure have a drive-through where you can buy alcohol and cocktails ready to go. But I won't go into the politics or the laws. 1 week after I had arrived, my friend looked at me frustrated. Something had happened. He confessed to me that the money that he had secured to start the movie had collapsed and that we had no movie and no project. This was devastating. I felt like I had thrown away everything that I had worked for, and now I had nothing, for reals, nothing. He told me that he was gonna work hard to get the money back, but that I had to wait for him. And, with a leap of faith, I believed in my friend and I stayed put to see what would happen. The days passed and the weeks passed, and I felt useless. There was nothing I could do. I didn't know anybody in the country. So my friend suggested networking. He sent me a website where I could meet foreign professionals and just grow my network. I thought that was a great idea. So I joined one of the meetings. It was in a very nice coffee shop in Santo Domingo. And the first guy who entered was a 50-year-old named David. He was a computer engineer and he was a very nice guy. Then another guy came in. He was about the same age and he was a scientist working a couple months there. And little by little, the coffee shop started filling in with all these men, all well over their 40s. And I felt a little bit out of place. So I decided not to return to that networking. The next thing that came to my mind were dating apps. I thought, well, maybe this detour that happened was meant to happen. I never had a girlfriend. I never had time. I never gave myself time for relationships. So I started using dating apps to meet girls. And before I move on, I have to explain a term that's very common in the dating applications. This term is ghosting. Ghosting happens when people randomly that you have already met and you have been communicating with, they randomly stop replying to your text messages or to your calls, and they basically become ghosts to you. This is a very common practice, and it happened to me a couple of times. And I never understood why some people just didn't tell you, you know what, this is not going to happen and this is not going to work. And they just were honest with you, but it happened. And then I got this application that instead of matching you with girls everywhere, they would just match you with girls that you met in the city, like proximity wise. And so one night I was matched to this amazing girl. Her name was Caroline. I asked her to go out for coffee and she accepted. And she was this amazing person. She was a professional, she was a dentist, and she was perfect in any way you can think of. I was delighted that she agreed to keep talking. And so after all this drama, I thought to myself, well, perhaps that detour of making the movie being stopped was good. You know, I got to meet Caroline. I'm here, I have some time to date some people. So I was a very, very happy person. Then one day, Caroline stopped answering my text messages and she stopped answering my calls. Essentially, she had ghosted me. You know, I was heartbroken, but there was nothing I could do about it. So I just moved on. Luckily for me, a few days later, she did reply to my messages, but she told me that she just wanted to be friends. I said that was fine. I didn't mind that. So we kept talking, not with the same frequency, but it was there, you know. We had something. By this time, the movie came back. The money my friend promised was back in the game. So we started to make the movie. So that was a good distraction for me. I went back to being my old self, very focused on my work, back to being the old workaholic that I always was. And even though I was making the movie and I was fulfilling the dream that I had set for myself as the pilot of my destiny, I felt something empty inside. I didn't feel like this was it, you know? One day when I was walking back to my hotel, I decided to sit by the beach looking at the moonlight. And, you know, the palm trees were there, and the sound of the music in the background was there. And it was just a beautiful night. And I remember looking up at the clouds and seeing how they were being pushed by the wind without being able to control themselves. They were just at the mercy of the wind. And I remember telling myself how sad, you know, these clouds can't control their destiny. And I just remember, well, it was like me when I was younger. I thought I could be the pilot of my life, but eventually I realized that sometimes you have to let life carry you. You don't have control of the things that happen to you or the detours that you have to go through. And I realized that perhaps it's not about setting a destination, but letting these things come and go, letting detours take you to places you didn't imagine or you didn't expect to have. So the day I was scheduled to leave to Los Angeles, Caroline called me, and we met for coffee. And she asked me if I would ever return to Santo Domingo. That question caught me off guard. I didn't know how to answer that, but I said, yes, I will return. So I left the Dominican Republic, and out of my experience, I felt like meeting Caroline was the one destination I never expected, you know, but all these detours took me there. And we kept talking. I met her in New York a couple of times. And 4 months ago, I fulfilled my promise to return to her country. I met her family, and I officially asked her to be my girlfriend. And now we are a couple. And just a few weeks ago, we started to talk about marriage. So it has been a long way, but I am in a new destination that I didn't think of having. But it was thanks to all those detours that I was able to come. And I'm here now in my parents' house with Caroline. She's right next to me. So she wanted to say hi to everybody.
Hi, everyone.
And that's the end of the story. Thank you so much.
Juan, that was interesting that you mentioned your comfort zone, Juan, because I've noticed that it's easy to stay in your comfort zone. It's harder to let that go because you have to rise to an occasion that you don't know what it's going to take. That was an interesting observation. So thank you, Juan.
Thank you.
And good to meet Caroline. Now, the next teller I want to introduce you to is a damn good man. So says Google. It's his web page, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram handle. Enjoy the detours of this damn good man. Dale Guy Madison tells when the road to selling dresses and diamonds on TV detours to wearing dresses and diamonds instead. Here he is.
Life for me has been a series of detours. I've done everything, and I feel like I've been everywhere. For me, it started in high school. I was that honors student who was destined to go on to NYU and study acting. It was my senior year in high school, and I fell in love with a guy. I remember coming home one day, and my dad saw the hickeys on my neck, and he said, "What girl put those hickeys on your neck?" And I turned to him and I said, "For a guy." He looked at me, he turned around, he walked out of the house. When he came back 20 minutes later, he said, "You got to leave my house, and you have 7 days." The dreams of going to NYU and studying acting went out the door. I had to figure out where I was going to live, how I was going to live, and take care of myself in 7 days. And I had 3 months left to my high school graduation. Somehow I pulled it off. Over that time period, I became an art model for an art college. I became a singing trolley driver. I worked for McDonald's. I sold ladies' shoes. I worked in a hotel. never giving up on the dream of becoming an actor. I even started my own storytelling company, Umoja Sasa Storytellers, Unity Now. We would travel to elementary schools and junior high schools and high schools, and we would tell African folktales and fables. It was a fabulous time. I taught myself how to sew. I began to make costumes for my performers. And one day, there was an ad in a local paper. It was a nationwide search looking for hosts to become discovered on the QVC channel. Now, many of you may or may not know that many years ago, before the advent of Amazon, where our shopping addictions allow us a click away, you could turn on the television set and a live person would pitch an item to you. And they would put so much love and passion and excitement into it that you couldn't help but to pick up that telephone and dial it in and say, I'll have that sequin sweater. I'll order that diamond-y piece of jewelry. So my coworker, my storyteller and partner, said, you know, they're getting ready to launch this new QVC fashion channel where all they're going to do is sell jewelry and fashion. Well, since you make our clothes and you're a storyteller, it's a natural fit. You should audition. So I send a picture and a resume, and I get a call. We'd like to see you. We'd like for you to audition to be a host on this new channel we're launching, the QVC Fashion Channel. So I find out you have 7 minutes in which to sell one item. I decide, it's 1991. I decide I'm going to make a pair of MC Hammer pants. Now, I don't know if you know what they are, but they're drop seat djembe pants. And African drummers would set the drum between their legs and then they would play on the drum and the fabric would engulf the drum. So I made a pair of these beautiful African drop seat pants and I arrived at the location and I was told to go to a hotel room. And it was odd for me because, I'd been an actor. I'd audition for things. I usually go to a casting director's office, but this time I'm going to a hotel room and I'm going to knock on this man's door and, it was his bedroom and he opened the door and I stepped over his dinner from the night before and he looks at his watch and he says, 7 minutes, sell me. And so I went into the spiel about the beauty of African pants and the drawstring and how it allowed you the comfort of being able to dance or to move or to gain weight or lose weight and you still have the comfort of these pants. And he laughed because he was a big man and he found that funny and entertaining. He'd take my audition. The fear of being molested in a hotel room went out the door because I seemed to have won him over. And shortly thereafter, I was told that I was going to be offered a chance to be a part of the QVC family. It was more money than I had ever seen in my lifetime. I had a $4,000 wardrobe budget. The QVC team came in and completely packed up my home. I didn't have to lift a finger. And they moved all of my things to Westchester, Pennsylvania, the most boring town in the country. And I go and I learn the aspects of how to become a QVC shopping host. It was a dream come true. I flourished there. I stood out. It was there weren't very many African-American television hosts at that time. I remember the first week I worked on the air. I came home after doing a 3-hour shift and I got a phone call and the lady said, hello, are you Guy Madison? And I said, yes. She says, are you a host on the QVC Fashion Channel? She says, yes. And she says, every time you turn that diamond ring, I play with myself. And I just think that you have the sexiest voice. And I screamed, hung the phone up, and it was like, I just got my first obscene phone call. I received my first obscene phone call. After that, I had a non-published number. The years went on at QVC. I spent 4 years there. In my second year at QVC, I went straight to the head of the department and I said, you know what? You don't have enough presence of African-American people. I want to do a show showcasing the culture and the beauty of Africa. I want to do an African-inspired show. I want to call it Destination Africa. And they loved it. They said, fine, you will host the show. We sold soapstone, we sold kente cloth, mud cloth, we sold African dolls. And then they said, would you like to sell your own dolls on QVC? And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was going to sell my own product. I handmade $500. I thought I would die. It was like a sweatshop in my attic as I put together these African dolls. Well, the day of the show arrived. The show generated new viewers for the channel. And then they said, oh my God, this is generating so much money. We want you to do it every year again during Black History Month. And I was saying, you know, I'm Black 365 days out of the year. And I'm sure that there are people that would enjoy this show, not just during Black History Month. So I was able to do more shows. Eventually, the shows sold over $1 million, and I had gotten thousands of new subscribers to QVC. Then, the detour I hadn't expected. The channel was bought by a Hollywood television executive. His name was Barry Diller. I don't know if you know who Barry Diller is, but he launched the Fox network. He used to be an amazing executive at Paramount Pictures. He came in and he decided that he was going to make QVC hip and new, and he decided that all of the hosts on the fashion channel were too old. I think I was 35. I'm like, okay, now I'm too old. He wanted to have this young hip channel, and it was going to be very MTV-like. And so he hired a whole bunch of new hosts, and he, within a sweep of a hand, I had no more job in television. I was like, my dream come true. I knew I was going to, you know, be discovered. I was going to be on this television show and people would see me. I'm interviewing Susan Lucci one week and Richard Simmons the next week and George Hamilton. I'm talking about skincare, hair care, sun tanning. But then within one stroke of a pen, I'm unemployed. Strangely enough, another newspaper article lands on my desk. There's a new film being shot in New York. It's called To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. And it stars Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo. They were looking for people to dress in drag for this comedy about these three drag queens that travel across country. So as the fashion channel was closing down and I'm sharing with my coworkers, I said, what do you think? And all of my coworkers said, we've got all these wigs and we've got these jewelry and we've got costumes. We can make you into the fiercest drag queen ever. They dressed me up. They brought down makeup. They beat me for the gods, as the expression is told. And I took some photographs and I sent them off to New York. Within days, they said, you're going to be booked to be a background extra on the movie To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. It was 2 weeks left before my job was over at QVC. I called off sick for my final 2 weeks and I caught a train to New York City. The day I arrived in Greenwich Village, the bus picked us up. You didn't even have to know where you were going. You just followed the sea of boas and suitcases and wigs and rhinestones. There were drag queens everywhere. And so we get on this bus and we go to Jersey City. I learned that I'm going to be there for a week to film a scene that was only to last for maybe 90 seconds. If you've ever seen the movie, 3 drag queens win a contest, or one drag queen wins a contest, but decides to split the money 3 ways, and 3 drag queens share the money and they go to California to compete in a drag queen contest of the world. So the night that they meet in the To Wong Foo restaurant. So every day it would take 4 hours. It would take 4 hours for us to become drag queens because they didn't allow you to do your own makeup. They actually had a team of people. So there were 100 of us and we would get dressed and we would wait all day long. And day after day, we would get dressed and we'd wait all day long. Well, come to find out, they were waiting for Robin Williams and Naomi Campbell, who were supposed to make guest appearances in this particular scene. So finally, by the end of the week, we make they show up and we do the scene. And this is the most important scene in the movie. This is the scene where the drag queens discover the photograph of Julie Newmar, where it says, To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything. And Patrick Swayze looks at this as a symbol of God and that they're supposed to drive a car across country to California. So I dress up. I'm there in the scene. We're shooting the scene and Robin Williams is improvising over and over and over. Every scene is a different take. Naomi Campbell gets up and she runs over to Wesley Snipes. She says, oh my God, you're so beautiful. And he pushes her away and everybody laughs because, you know, she's the most beautiful model in the world. And here's Wesley Snipes in drag and somehow she's in awe of him. So there was all of this humor. so there were so many pauses that Wesley Snipes came over to our table, and he says, "Thank you guys for being so patient and waiting with us and night after night," because it was 1 o'clock in the morning. There was smoke everywhere. The director was pregnant. I don't know how she managed to direct through that film. She was probably 6 to 8 months pregnant. Smoke was everywhere. So Wesley Snipes, is talking to me, and he says, "You look like somebody. You just look like somebody I know." And I said, "Could it be Oprah Winfrey? Everybody's telling me I look like Oprah Winfrey when I'm in drag." He says, "No, but I'll figure out what it is." And I said, "Would you be kind enough to take a photograph with me? I know we're not allowed to take photographs with celebrities on set. You could get fired." He says, "Sure." So the scene ends when the sun comes up and Wesley takes a picture with me, and I'm like, this is wonderful. This is a great new addition to my career. All of a sudden, that turns into somebody on the set saying, "Oh, they're shooting another movie and they need more drag queens for that, and they're shooting that in New York in 1 week." So I'm like, okay, I don't need that QVC thing anymore. When one door closes, another door opens. So I send out my pictures, I get selected, and this movie is called Stonewall. It's an independent little film, and it's all about the night of the Stonewall riots in 1969, the night that Judy Garland dies, and the police raid the Stonewall Inn, and the drag queens and the transgender women fight back for their lives. So I'm dressed to the hilt. I've got a pink chiffon gown on with boas and hair teased up like Diana Ross in the 60s from the Supremes, and it was such a loving set. It was so intimate. It wasn't hundreds of drag queens. It was only about 15 or 20 of us. And each night we would, do our scenes. We'd be in the bar, and they would, so the climax was the scene where the police officer breaks into the Stonewall Inn. And so they're dragging out each drag queen, and they're throwing us in the paddy wagon. And so the director says, "Dale, I need you to knock over one of the policemen, take the keys, and unlock the handcuffs so that the drag queens can get free." And so I execute the scene as my extra. I'm not saying any words, but the cameras are rolling and there's no sound. And everybody's starting chanting as soon as I started unlocking the handcuffs, "Free the slaves, free the slaves, free the slaves." And so the director says, "Perfect, wonderful." And then someone came to me at the end of the scene and they says, "If you ever decide to become a real drag queen, Frida Slave might be a great name for you." I was like, not bad. So I returned back home to Baltimore. I've been in Westchester, I've been to New York, and now it's time to come back to Baltimore and start my life all over again, figure out what I'm going to do. I tell my best friend, who's a writer on the NBC series Homicide: Life on the Streets, about my experience in New York. And he says, "I want to write you a one-man show about a drag queen, and we'll call her Frida Slave." And we called it, the name of the show was Frida Slave, Mask of a Diva. We wrote the show, and the show won a grant, and then it won another award. And the next thing you know, we decided, why don't we take this show to California? So we packed up all of our possessions, got in his little Sentra, and we drove across country nonstop. He would drive, I would sleep. I would drive, he would sleep. And we got to LA in 3 days. We pitched the play to a theater, the Hudson Theater on Santa Monica Boulevard, and they booked us. We stayed there for 4 months, and we were written up as the show, the pick of the week. And I started getting reviews, and I got an agent, and I ended up shooting a pilot for a television show that wasn't picked up. And then my agent started sending me on auditions, and every audition was an audition to be a drag queen. Now, I love being a character on screen, but somehow only being thought of as a drag queen started to gnaw at me. And I started feeling typecast. It was like every day was like, I grow a beard between I love having hair on my face, but I have to shave everything off, get dressed at the brightest part of the day, full makeup, and drive to Hollywood and audition for 2 minutes, come home and take off everything and start all over again. I was so frustrated that I finally just said, I can't do this anymore. And I enrolled in college. By this time, I was 50 years old. And I enrolled in college, and I decided that I was going to be an educator. I was going to use the art of education to teach young people about life, how the arts can impact us with life. I got my degree and my master's degree at 50 years old. My detour in life was at 18, this young kid was going to go to NYU and become an actor. And life took me through all of these different turns. I was selling diamonds and gowns, and then I was wearing diamonds and gowns. And then I was like, you know, I need to put all of this to the side and figure out what's the next detour in life. And for me, it became an art educator. And I never looked back. I used the impact of being who I was and how I stood in my truth to empower other young people. And the next thing you know, I started getting calls to do speaking engagements all over the country. And I'd speak to LGBT youth. And I got a job at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. And I was dealing with youth at risk. And I was showing them how you could use the arts to educate people. And one day my kids encouraged me to put that dress on again. And I put that dress on after 10 years of not doing that dress, of almost hating that dress. And then I fell in love with it again. And then I wrote myself a one-man show. And I took that show to New York, and I took that show around Los Angeles. And now I've taken that show and I've turned it into a pilot for a television series. It's called My Life in 3 Easy Payments. And I learned that sometimes the projected road in which you want to come on doesn't necessarily turn out the way that you want to, but somehow destiny will take you back if you never give up on your passion and you never give up on your dream. And I dared to dream, and I'm happy at 63 today, still alive and still being able to tell that story of my life. Thank you.
Oh, Dale, hooray. You know, I was just talking to a cousin who said, never give up. She just told me that. How beautiful, Dale. Whoa, that's a journey. That's a journey. Okay, I'm going to introduce you. We have 2 more tellers. This next teller chose a quote from Lily Tomlin as Edith Ann. Sometimes when I'm happy, I feel like crying. But when I'm sad, I never feel like laughing. So I think it's better to be happy. You get 2 feelings for the price of 1. Welcome, Mike Lambert. He tells a story called Walking Home.
Thank you, Anne. Glad to be here. Hello, everybody. Awesome stories. My story is about a detour I took on the way home from the Christian Science Sunday School in Studio City when I was 13 years old. By the time I was 13 years old, I wanted nothing more than to be a good Christian Scientist. I had a dream and I made it happen. Well, I tried to make it happen. I'd been attending Sunday school since I was 3 years old and I loved it. I went to a private special school in Beverly Hills just for Christian Science kids called Berkeley Hall. I learned the commandments. I learned the Beatitudes. I learned that matter is unreal and that human existence is an illusion. I memorized the Scientific Statement of Being by Mary Baker Eddy, which declares emphatically, spirit. Now, if you can understand this, you can heal anybody. So I offer this to you. Spirit is God and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material. He is spiritual. Now go out and heal. I learned that if I could just understand this one central fact, I could heal anything from a stub toe to stomach cancer. And I had a lot of healing to do. My family, for starters. My mom was on Milltowns, my dad was on Cutty Sark, my sister was on probation, and all of us were on high alert. My Christian Science friends, some of them had hand-sewn samplers on their living room walls that said things like, home sweet home, or bless this house. We didn't have one, but if we did, it would have said duck and cover. I was determined to be a good Christian Scientist no matter what, to overcome material illusions and to experience something approaching peace and quiet and safety. I just knew if I could heal my family, I would feel okay at last. And by the age of 13, if I do say so myself, I was doing a pretty good job. Then I discovered wrestling magazines. In the magazine rack at Saba's Pharmacy on Coldwater and Ventura, where the school bus would drop me off, these magazines, they were incredible. And suddenly matter was not only very real, it was all I could think about. the photos, sweaty, angry, over-muscled, overweight, unspeakably beautiful men that I could not stop staring at. Before long, I would hang out at different newsstands around the neighborhood because you couldn't stay too long without purchasing one, and I was too ashamed to purchase one. And at home, I'd become obsessed with television shows. Oh my God. It was like a homosexual cavalcade. The Tom Jones Show, Steve Reeves movies, and countless Star Trek episodes with William Shatner in chains, shirtless, manacled to break free. You know what I'm talking about. Apparently S&M was very big in Alpha Centauri. I really didn't know what was happening, but I did know that it was wrong. I became terrified of my own impulses, my own feelings, my own drives. I became terrified of me. And most of all, I'm screaming, aren't I? Most of all, I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell anyone. Certainly not a Christian Science practitioner, and definitely not my mom, who referred to people like I feared I was becoming with supreme derision as fairies and fags and queers. I went to the Christian Science reading room and I found a copy of the Christian Science Journal with an article titled, "Homosexuality Can Be Healed." And I thought, this is it. God has put this in my lap so that I can be free of this. I read that motherfucker 20 times in one day, hoping to be healed. It didn't help. So prayer was not really going to work. And so I turned to something more powerful. Secrecy. Secrecy and silence. As long as no one knew, I was safe. As long as no one knew, I could breathe. As long as no one knew, I'd be okay. And that was the new status quo. And then one day, I was standing next to a Sunday school classmate named David Johnson in the men's room of the Beverly Hilton Hotel, adjusting my clip-on tie, getting ready for my ballroom dancing class with Mrs. Paul Henry's cotillion, which David and I both attended on scholarship. You know, looking back, I see that it was Mrs. Paul Henry's cotillion that was the real red flag. That was the giveaway. It wasn't William Shatner so much, but I didn't see that at the time. Anyway, I'm there in the men's room and I'm fixing my tie, and David Johnson says in his typically kind of creepy and unctuous way, he goes, you know, we're 13 years old. He goes, I've been experimenting with gay sex. And if you'd like to come over this week after Sunday school, I can show you some things. I felt like a cannonball had hit me right in the stomach. I couldn't breathe and my mind was racing because this was my secret. How did he know? I had been so careful. And how much did he know? And who else knew? And why him? Why David Johnson? Why not Ricky May or Danny Lindsay or someone I actually liked? I never liked David Johnson. He was creepy and oily and repulsive. Yes, I acted nice to him, but that was only because his dad was on Gilligan's Island. I stood there in a trance state for what was probably an instant, but felt like forever. And suddenly I fell into this sort of hypnotic, sort of automaton mode. I had this clarity. This is what I am. I am this thing. I'm the same as David Johnson. I am the very thing I don't want to be. And this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what people like me are supposed to do. People like me are supposed to go home with David Johnson after Sunday school and do stuff they don't want to do because that's just the way it is. I have to do this. So I clipped on my tie and I turned to David Johnson and I said, okay. So that week as Sunday school came to a close, we stood and sang a hymn. I walk with love along the way. And oh, it is a holy day. No more I suffer cruel fear. I feel God's presence with me here. The only presence I felt was David Johnson's, standing 2 rows behind me, staring into me with searing eyes that could see parts of me that I could no longer hide. So a few minutes later, we were up at David's big adobe-style house, nestled in a cliffside in the hills overlooking the San Fernando Valley. His mother made us bologna sandwiches and announced that she was off to her women's club meeting and would be back in 2 hours to give me a ride home. The front door closed behind her, and I heard her car drive away. "Let's go downstairs," David said. And still in that compliant, hypnotized mode, I nodded and followed. I won't go into detail about what happened after that, but I can tell you it was cold and clinical and joyless. At one point, David Johnson pulled out a magazine to show me a photo that I think was supposed to help get me in the mood. But the guy in the photo, he didn't look anything like my wrestling heroes, or Steve Reeves, or William Shatner. He was young, pale, thin. He looked a little lost. He looked like me, and I hated him. When it was over, Mrs. Johnson wasn't home yet, and I just told David I would walk home. It was a long walk, but I found my way down the windy road to Ventura Boulevard, and I started. It felt endless, and I felt dazed and seasick. And as I walked along the boulevard, I would catch reflections of myself in the shiny surfaces of the office buildings or some of the store windows. And I saw a pretty grotesque figure, a white, pimply, hollowed out freak with a secret that everyone could see. And I just wanted to get home. But I wasn't sure I would ever be home again, because I wasn't sure people like me had homes, just secrets. It felt very much that day like my life had come to an end, but I discovered over time that it had not. I survived the rest of 8th grade at Berkeley Hall and 9th, transferred to public high school, joined the drama club, marching band, went to college, moved to New York City, forged a career, fell in and out of love numerous times, marched proudly, albeit ambivalently, in countless gay pride parades, and led a life that has been so far varied and colorful, and yes, sometimes downright joyful. I sit before you today, living proof that we are a resilient species. But that freak I saw that day in the windows, he never entirely left. I got really good at ignoring him, but I couldn't get rid of him. We just had to call a sort of uneasy truce with occasional skirmishes now and then. And then a couple of months ago, it hit me that 50 years had gone by since my detour to David Johnson's house. And as it happens, I live ridiculously close now to the scene of the crime. Thank you, Dr. Freud, for moving me here. So I decided to take that walk again and just see what it felt like. Just retrace my steps, listen, look, see if that freak in the windows had anything to tell me. And frankly, I was really hoping he would, not so much for my own healing, but because I knew it would make a great story for Tales by the Sea. And I wish I could tell you that we met and had this amazing reconciliation, and we hugged and cried in each other's arms and made peace and forgave each other, but that didn't happen. But what did happen was that I got this simple, quiet, easy, crystal clear, high definition clarity that 13-year-old me who took that walk 50 years ago had done absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing. It was so clear, and it was so different from 50 years ago. So there was no question about forgiveness or overcoming. There was just nothing on the table to worry about. I walked with love along the way, and oh, it was a holy day. Oh, and that freak in the windows? He was still there, but he looked kind of hot. In case you're wondering, David Johnson went on to become one of the leading figures in the gay rights movement in Los Angeles, doing a lot of good for a lot of people until he died of AIDS sometime in the 80s. I admit I was kind of relieved when I heard the news, but now I can't help wishing he was still here so I could have him over to my house in Studio City, give him a hug, make him a drink, look him in the eye and say, David Johnson, you prepubescent predator, go fuck yourself. Ah, home at last.
Thank you, Mike, for doing that. That's, you know, when you said, oh, you talked about being terrified of me, which is, and the self-loathing. And then you talked about secrecy and silence, and I couldn't help but think it reminded me of the SS. Secrecy and silence. It's like the SS, what I imagine the SS were. That, oh, I'm glad, I'm so glad you're with us, Mike. Thanks so much for being here and sharing this walk. Our last teller chose a quote from Dorothy Parker. Of course I talk to myself. I like a good speaker, and I appreciate an intelligent audience. Welcome Monica Piper. She tells a story entitled You.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It was 3 days past my 70th birthday, but I still felt I deserved more cake. So there I was at the bakery counter of Cantor's Deli, behind an elderly couple who was ordering. Well, she was. I'll have a rye bread, thinly sliced, no seeds, a 1/4 pound of apricot rugula, and a nice piece of babka, at which point her little husband said, "What about me?" You. Fine. 1 bran muffin. I thought, oh, that poor little browbeaten man. But then, to my utter surprise, a few minutes later, she kissed his bald little head and they walked out holding hands. How sweet, I thought. They still had love, just the old comfortable kind. And then I realized that for me, that ship had sailed. "Can I help you?" asked the masked, hair-netted woman behind the counter. That suddenly seemed like a very interesting question. But I snapped out of it and focused on a giant chocolate chip twisty thing instead. On the way home, I thought, wow, you have to be with somebody a lot of years to become a you. So many yous in between. If I'd stayed married, we might have gotten there, but I almost killed him at you. And that was the end of that. Now, understand, I was not feeling sorry for myself. I was perfectly content with my single life. But don't you get lonely, my married friends would ask. Not really. I find myself quite entertaining. Well, don't you miss being in a relationship? I'm in multi-relationships with Netflix, Prime, and Hulu. But do you really want to grow old alone? First of all, I'm already old. I've shrunk 3 inches and I actually read the articles in Art Magazine. And secondly, I'm not old. I mean, I'm not alone. Yes, we've established I'm old, excuse me. I'm not alone. I have my son, great friends, my dog and my cat. But don't you miss having sex? Well, yeah, there's the rub, or lack of one. It did seem like a terrible waste of my new hip. But I've always had to be in love for that. And truthfully, I was too lazy to find it. I mean, if it were easy, like going to the man section on Amazon, clicking add to cart, and he could easily be returned. I know there are senior dating sites like Our Time and Silver Singles. What's next? I can't walk that far.com. And I'm a writer, so my profile alone would end up being 3 pages in 2 acts. Too much work. Besides, I was perfectly happy with my very full life, and there simply was no room for a man. The care and feeding alone. And how would he understand that I spent days and days writing alone, isolated in my house? Now, it's too late. I'm set in my ways. I'm perfectly content being sloppy and messy in a house that tends to get cluttered. What if I do meet someone who turns out to be a neat freak and my house is the thing that gives him a heart attack? And that's the other thing about this age. I don't want to fall in love with someone 5 minutes before he falls apart. I've grown selfish. Trust me, he wouldn't want me as his caregiver. I'll be doling out his pills, 1 for you, 3 for me. I relished my independence. All right. Now I have told you all of this, so you will understand my state of being the following day at Ralph's Market. There I was in the produce section, examining cantaloupes, when a 60-something looking guy asked, how do you tell if they're good? I said, well, as I took in his full head of hair, nice clothes, warm eyes above the mask, and empty ring finger, you smell it to see if it's sweet, and then you squeeze it because you don't want it too hard, but definitely not squishy. He chuckled. That sounds dirty. I laughed. Then you don't want to know about the cucumbers. Then he laughed. And I really wished I could see his face behind the mask, but there weren't any large protuberances, so that was something. Then he said, you know, I think I know your voice. Are you that comedian? I said, I don't know. Did she bomb or did she make you laugh? He said, you are her. Monica's somebody, right? I nodded. Piper. He said, yes, you're great. Immediately, we agreed on something. Steve Weinraub, he said. Nice to meet you. I could hear my dead Aunt Rose in heaven. He's Jewish. I even surprised myself next when I asked if he cared to join me in frozen foods. One thing led to another. We talked about Richard Pryor and George Carlin and Haagen-Dazs versus Ben & Jerry's and how we were both double vaxxed. And then he said, you have pretty eyes. I thanked him and said, well, yours are nice too. Then thought, well, so were Ted Bundy's. By the time we got to soups, I had learned that we both had a sweet tooth, loved our dogs, and that he was an architect recently divorced when his wife decided she was a lesbian. When our shopping was done, it felt weird, you know, like that's it. But then he said, hey, do you want to go for coffee sometime? By now, almost certain he wasn't a serial killer, and wanting to see him again, I gave him my card, said, Sure, why not? 3 days later, after frantically shopping for meet someone for coffee clothes and saying, I can't believe I'm doing this 20 times, there we were with our lattes and our lemon squares at an outdoor cafe. The time had come to remove our masks, and fortunately, no one's jaw dropped in horror, and we both smiled, relieved. He had a very sweet face, more cute than handsome, but handsome enough. And then the conversation just flowed about our grown kids, our careers, and somewhere between our Jewish families and our love of sports, I imagined kissing him. We made a dinner date for when he got back from his nephew's wedding in Chicago, and we sort of awkwardly hugged goodbye. These feelings, so long dead, suddenly reawakened, new but familiar. My friends were equally shocked and thrilled to hear me say, I think I met someone. The week he was gone, I threw stuff out, cleaned my house, and bought a gorgeous new bedspread. First time in ages, I wore something sexy. I mean, 70 is the new 69. And he looked good in his shirt and jacket, and we ordered wine and dinner, but then I realized something was off. He seemed distracted and uneasy. Is something wrong? I said. Yeah, well, I have something to tell you. And out it came. It seemed that at the wedding, he had reconnected with his ex-wife, who realized she wasn't a lesbian, wanted to come back, and they decided to give it another shot. What? My mind was racing. No, this is my shot. It felt like someone had given me a warm homemade cookie, then snatched it back and stomped on it. He said, I hope you'd understand. He was very attracted to me, but they'd been married for over 30 years and it just felt so comfortable. Perfect. Keep cool, I thought. Say something nice, say something understanding. But what came out was, are you fucking kidding me? If you even had an inkling, why would you? I'm sorry, he said. I should have called you and canceled the dinner. I just felt like it would be better if I told you in person. It was very thoughtless of me. Then out of my mouth came, you. Wow, that happened faster than expected. At that point, I just kind of surrendered to the irony of it, calmed down, and insisted he buy me dessert. As he sat watching me devour my chocolate mousse, I apologized for my outburst and wished him the best of luck, and that was the end of that. Now you're probably thinking, I vowed at that moment never to try that again and ran back to my settled ways. But curiously enough, I had sparked to those reawakened feelings, and I wanted to feel them again. there are men out there. I'm still not ready for a senior dating site like Prune Pals, but I did buy some new makeup and a book on how to organize your house and your life. And now that I have Meet Someone for Coffee clothes, I think tomorrow I'll start writing at Starbucks. As I passed the hall mirror, I stopped and took a look and thought, and you know, if I don't meet someone, there's always you.
Monica, what was interesting about that is how stuff reawakens, and how, as Juan was talking about, a comfort zone. We do get in a comfort zone.
Well, you know, it's like a reawakening after the pandemic. You know, we're reawakening slowly to this world we once knew, and it's like, I'm still here, welcome back. I mean, all those things. So, and and he certainly was a detour, you know, from where I was.
And it also has to do with just the comfort zones that we can be in regardless of pandemic or not.
Right.
Because we do achieve a certain comfort. And
right. Especially as you get older, it seems you're so settled in your ways, you know, you just can't imagine. Like, I really have to hold in gas for somebody, you know, I just, you know.
Maybe it's time to take general comments now and let the
okay.
audience unmute and ask questions if they want.
I have a question. First of all of you were just wonderful. I really enjoyed each and every story. I have a question for Stuart, which is, how do you think you should have handled that situation with your grandson?
I mean, the bad guy thing?
Yeah.
You know, I think that I don't know. It's a really good question. And rather than, I just don't know. I mean, you know, you had to go with the flow at the time, and you know, I don't, you know, I wish I got a better answer for you.
Okay.
Did you ask him what he thought a bad guy was? What makes
You're
a
right.
bad guy?
You're right. You know, what's a bad guy, you know? But, you know, I was so thrown off balance by it, you know? And, you know, and then also the storyteller in me really wanted, you know, to savor the moment, you know, so to speak, you know? Because I really would love to have said, of course he's a bad guy. In terms of, about my wife, you know, but I think he might misinterpret that, take that to the bank. So.
Thank
It
you.
can be so hard answering those questions in that moment, especially when you're taken aback by what that question is.
Totally thrown off balance by that question. You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
The best advice I ever got when I was early in my teaching years, where we were trying to figure out, you know, what do you do when your kid start asking you questions about where do babies come from? Now, I had to deal with it as a parent. Now I was having to deal with it as a teacher. So all of us in the audience are waiting to see what the teacher said. And he said, you know what? You have to realize that what's in your head is not what's in the kid's head. What's in the kid's head is something so simple, it's probably not even related to what you're thinking. And if you simply answer just that little thing, that's probably all they want. So when I finally had my kid ask me about babies and I started to hyperventilate, I reminded myself and I asked her, and sure enough, it was just a simple thing she was asking, and I survived. And I'll bet you he probably had some action figures at home or had seen something on TV and had some notion of a bad guy. And he was just asking. It was probably a little thing.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
Friends, I just want to let you know that we have enabled the ability for the chat room as well. So if you would like to ask any questions or leave any comments for the storytellers there, you are able to do so. And if not, we just invite you to unmute and lift up your questions.
I have another question. Why not? Dale, did your father ever come to terms with your sexuality?
My father and I ended up having a hot and cold relationship for the next few years of his life. We went for years with not speaking to each other and then speaking to each other. Ironically, when I got the job at QVC, he actually would watch me on television every night, and then he would call me and critique my clothes. Then we fell out over a boyfriend again, and then I married a woman, and then he spoke to me during the time I was married to my wife, and then when my wife and I divorced, then he stopped speaking to me again. And then by the time he finally passed away in 2006, we hadn't spoken in 3 years.
Yeah, thank you.
What a bumpy ride we go on as people with all our judgments about how we think things have to be. What a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Very true.
KB in chat says, brilliant, all of you. Thank you for sharing such personal stories and detours. And I would agree. A big thank you to just bringing your authentic selves and sharing those personal stories with us. They were all amazing and impactful. So I wanted to thank you.
Oh, and I want you to know that Erin was going to put the link up.
Yes.
A link that you can access if you want to see any of the prior concerts. They've been recorded.
And what we've done is we've recorded tonight as well. We will send that to the storytellers for their final approval, and we will have it on Malibu United Methodist Church's YouTube channel. The link is in the chat, but we will also email that out to the Tales list so that you have access to that. When you go to the YouTube channel for the church, don't be scared by all of the sermons on there. There are playlists you can go to specifically for Tales. There's also a playlist for our Poetry by the Sea as well, to make it a little bit easier to find, because there's a number of videos on there at this point.
I just want to say that I thank you and the church for being open to hearing tales that people stand in their truth. You know, I found myself editing portions of my life as I was telling my story, because I was afraid. I didn't realize that this was a church based. And then I see how embracing you are of all kinds of people. And I smack myself for holding back, because I think it's so powerful that a place like a church takes down that wall and allows people to be themselves. And I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. Anne, did you want to say something?
Well, yeah, we don't want him to smack himself too hard. We want him to come back to Tales.
I was just going to say that. Please come back. Please.
I want to echo what he said. I want to thank you for this opportunity.
We're so grateful for all of you for joining us today, and to be able to, our stories are so powerful. And sometimes, I mean, they're not just powerful to us, but they are inspirational, and they're powerful to those that we share them with. But it takes a leap of faith. It takes an act of bravery to share those stories. And so we appreciate that. And we thank you.
Yes, as an audience, we really do.
Yeah.
Each and everyone.
We need them. They encourage us. They inspire us. How else can we get to know one another and want to walk side by side? Yeah.
Judy in the chat says, wonderful, fantastic. There was some confusion as to when the storytelling started. Some came around 5 o'clock. And so we are so sorry about that, but we will have it on YouTube for you to catch any stories that you might have missed. And then my parents in the chat room put, thank you, storytellers. You are all wonderful.
And we're going to have, since this is the last concert, I wanted to wish you Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. There is so much holy to celebrate.
Just last of the year, not last.
Yeah, the last of this year. Yeah. The next one is actually January 16th. And I'm gonna put some themes out there and see what all you're attracted to, you tellers are attracted to. We see Willie Brown bouncing around there. He's bouncing around. Now we know we can't see him.
I'm bouncing around.
Okay, you
I've
are.
been bouncing all day.
Oh.
Hello.
Gretchen, please.
So at any rate, you'll hear when our next concert is. And I think that is, I didn't share my quote that I forgot to share that I picked out from a Rabbi Bunham. Our greatest crime is that we can turn every moment and do not. Part of detours,
I love that.
the courage to turn like Juan did, like so many of you did. I mean, you gave it up. I've never had to give everything up like that. So I've not lived that experience. You know, I don't want to talk myself down and think that I'm less than for not living it, but I have not lived that experience. And I think Raquel probably has. I see she's here. And I know some of you have, and it's at any rate. So we'll see you on January 16th again. And if anyone else has any other question to ask.
There's a question for Juan.
Okay.
It's in the chat. Somebody asked, are you still in film?
Great.
Yes, I just finished my first feature film, so I'm still at it. Thank you so much.
That's wonderful to hear. Wonderful to hear. Any other questions or comments that you would like to share before we go this evening?
Boy, did I identify with Monica. That was great.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. Monica, you've inspired me.
Oh, thank you. All you single ladies. Go to Ralph.
You like the group, the names, the site names you came up with for I can only walk this far.
I can't walk that far.com.
And the Prunes one, that was great.
I just know that all of this whole gathering, every single one of you gives me the courage never to give up. It's always worth it to keep going. Even if it's just to be with you guys every few months. So thank you, all of you.
You too, sweetie. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing
making this a nice space.
Thank you. Safe space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That comes from
See
you.
you later.
Bye, folks.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. Bye.